Joining me now is Steve Goreham, speaker and author, executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America. And if you didn't know, there is a climate science conference going on this week in Madrid. And the climate deniers, such as Steve Gorman, well, they're not invited. But Steve's with us now. And I guess now you can can you, Steve, wear the title of climate denier like a badge of honor, Steve?
Hi, John. Great to join you. Well, it's kind of an interesting title. And the ironic part of it is I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't think the climate changes. You talk to anybody, they think the climate changes. So nobody denies that the climate changes. They just say that maybe your SUV or your power plant isn't causing that change. Maybe it's dominated by natural factors. But yeah, don't sell your winter coat. It was just a few years ago that a bunch of folks, Dr. David Viner, said snow is disappearing. It's going to be something we talk about in history, but it doesn't seem to be with this year's winter.
Well, Steve, so there's a conference, there's a UN conference this week in Madrid, Spain, 25,000 people attending it. This is the 25th conference, what they call the Conference of the Parties. And climate activist Greta Thunberg is stuck on a sailboat somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, I guess, trying to get there. She might be a little bit late because, of course, according to the climate people, you really can't fly, right? You can't take a jet. You can't take a car. So it's basically bicycles, trains, or boats, right?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. We have about 25,000 people every day that get on a flight, and thousands cross the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. But Greta would like everybody to take a sailboat to wherever they're going. And the reason she's late to the Madrid conference is it takes more than a week to cross the Atlantic, and she thought she was going to Chile, but they moved it. But yeah, we've got. I think they're going to get maybe 29,000 at this conference. And you're right. 25th Conference of the Parties. This has been going on for a quarter of a century now. If we all live long enough, we may see the 50th Conference of the Parties of these people getting together. But there really is no evidence that all of the measures that hundreds of nations have taken across the world are having the slightest effect on global temperatures. We have more than 1,000 climate change laws across 160 nations or so. $3 trillion have been spent over the last decade. But today the world gets exactly the same amount of energy from coal, oil, and gas, about 82% as we got in 1985. So not only we're not affecting global temperatures, we're really not affecting the amount of energy we're getting from hydrocarbons.
So with all the talk about global warming, why did we have one of the coldest Novembers in history?
We did, yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of records were broken in mid-November, and so it's ironic in many ways. We tied some all-time records in Chicago here for November. Much of the Deep South had very cold temperatures. And this again is completely unexplained, and also this idea about snowfall. If you ask any college student, is snowfall decreasing? Is snow cover decreasing? They'll probably say yes. That's what they're taught in schools. Out in Colorado, we have a number of counties suing the oil industry because the industry is disappearing. But if you look at the actual data, snow extent has been actually increasing over the last 40 years, even though it's been a little bit warmer, a few tenths of a degree. Your listeners can go to the Rutgers University Global Snow Lab and see that snow extent has actually been increasing over the last 40 years. But just another myth or misconception that people have about what's going on with the climate.
Well, we're with Steve Gorham. He's the executive director of Climate Science Coalition of America and author of a few books on energy, climate change, and sustainable development. He's got over 100,000 copies in print. His latest work, Outside the Green Box, Rethinking Sustainable Development tells its readers what their green consultant didn't tell them. Let me ask you something else, Steve. Goreham with us as this UN conference, 29,000 people go on. The UN is now proposing speed limits for ships to reduce global warming. So now they want to slow ships down, even though they're in the open waters. I mean, come on, man. When does this nonsense stop?
It's kind of crazy. Well, actually, we do slow ships off the coast of Virginia, for example. There are some whale frequented areas, so at certain parts of the year, I think the ships are under a restriction to slow down a little bit.
That makes sense. I mean, that's like, you want to slow down to protect the mating or the natural habitat of a sea animal that's like whales that should be protected. I mean, that makes sense. That's the function of what governments do. But then to go out when you're in the open waters in the middle of the Pacific Ocean trying to get from point A to point B, and now you got a speed limit on a cargo liner. I mean, come on, man. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, a recent report by G.L. Reynolds said that if we reduce global ship speeds 10 to 20%, we could save all these carbon dioxide emissions and sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and that's been adopted by the United Nations now as policy going forward. Mm-hmm. Problem with that is if you cut all the ship speeds by 10% or so, you'd have to carry the same amount of goods. You'd have to have 10% more ships, and that's about $100 billion in expense in the ships alone, plus the cost for training crews.
But then you don't get the benefit of the carbon saving because although you've slowed down, you've added more boats in the water. So
you do.
This stuff doesn't make any sense.
Matter of fact, they were saying that you'd have less whale collisions if you slow down the boats. But if you have 10% more ships out there, you're going to have more whale collisions as well.
All right. So let me go to a topic, Steve, that we're not going to agree on. Okay. I have no problem with profit-making sustainable wind turbines off the Atlantic coast, especially off Virginia. I just don't like if they can generate some energy and they're not an eyesore, right? And they're not. I mean, I live in Virginia Beach, so they're not going to be an eyesore. I mean, we see ships. You go to the beach, you sit there. You can't be there 2 seconds without seeing 82 cargo ships go by off the horizon in the distance.
Yep.
So if an energy company wants to put a wind turbine out there to generate X percent of energy, and they want to pay for it without your tax dollars, who the hell cares?
Yeah, I don't. Actually, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with renewables, but here's the problem: the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind Project off the coast of Virginia Beach said they're going to put two big 6-megawatt wind turbines out there at a price of $300 million, and this has been approved by your Virginia State Corporation Commission. $300 million is 25 times the market price for wind turbines. And the agreed-to energy price was 78 cents a kilowatt hour, and your wholesale price of electricity is 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So 25 times the capital cost, 26 times the wholesale price. This has been approved for Virginia. And guess what? These wind turbines don't even have the survivability. If a hurricane comes by, they're only rated for 112 miles an hour, 50 meters a second. And if you get a Category 3, they're going to go. And also, it's even worse with the wave height. They're rated for waves of 51 feet. And the recent Hurricane Florence, a Category 1 off the coast of South Carolina, had waves 83 feet high. So, yeah, again, I don't have a problem if these things, if the taxpayers aren't on the hook for these, the ratepayers, if they make economic sense. But 25 times the price and not survivable from a hurricane point of view, to me, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but the taxpayers aren't on the hook for this. This is funded by private industry. So if private industry does an analysis and they want to do it as part of their energy production, I'm not going to stand in their way, right? Just like I'm not going to stand in the way of any company deciding how to spend their money. And if the shareholders don't like it, they have a meeting and they get rid of the members of the board and they fire the CEO. I mean, that's the way private industry works.
Right. I agree. I'm a big private industry guy. The problem is that the ratepayers are going to be stuck for this, and they're going to be paying 25 times the rate. Your governor and Governor Northam, the legislators have approved this. By the way, I've just bought a condo with my wife in Virginia Beach, so I'm I'm going to be a local resident 5 months of the year.
Good for you.
But I don't think your governor or your legislators would pay 25 times the price for their clothing or their food or anything else. Yet they've approved this for the ratepayers of Virginia. So to me, they ought to be taking better care of the ratepayers than what they are.
Well, that's the energy company that sets this is a private profit-making industry. You can buy or sell their stock on the stock exchange. I'm just not going to get in the way of that. And if rates go up right now, Dominion Energy, who's behind this, their rates right now are 33% lower than any other state of the 5 contiguous states to Virginia.
That's good.
So I'm just not going to get in the way. I'm just not going to get in the way. If it's a bad deal, they'll figure it out, lose money, write it off, right? But meantime, they're attempting, to get as much renewable energy as they can. So we can differ on that. But Steve, the other stuff, look, you're 100% right on. It's always good to get your perspective, and just unbelievable. 29,000 people in Madrid at a UN climate change conference. I mean, what an outstanding waste of time and money that must be, right? But I guess that's the biggest superstition in modern history, that a trace gas is controlling our temperatures and that we can change it. We can change global temperatures by building wind turbines, electric cars, changing light bulbs. That is a modern superstition. And traveling in sailboats and bicycles. Steve Goreham, thanks for being with us. Read Steve's new book, Outside the Green Box, Rethinking Sustainable Development. Tells readers what their green consultant didn't tell them.